Hello, AP Research students. This is Sean tonight reporting from his classroom here at Miami High School, where some of you might remember me saying that taking AP Research is reminiscent of that Chinese proverb that the 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. So when I look at my calendar up here, and it looks like near the second, third, or towards the end of the first marking period, we're taking some of our first steps towards this very long journey. And one of those big first steps is for you to complete your exploratory review of the literature. That's where you had a chance to look at two research questions that really interested you, to take a look at what had been written and researched about those, but ultimately you need to make a decision about one. So today I'm going to talk about an exercise that I lead my students in that helps them make that decision about which of the two will be the one that you will be dedicated to for the rest of the year. It's almost like getting married. So you've been dating two different people, but you're going to make a commitment to just one. Now, this activity that I'm going to share with you, it reminds me of two activities that I've engaged in outside of the classroom. And one of them was quite fun when I was a child. We used to buy these little booklets that were called Mad Libs. And a Mad Lib was like a story with a bunch of blanks in it. And you were prompted to write a verb or an adjective or a noun in the blanks. And you would end up having a story on your own. So this activity that I'm going to lead you through is as simple as doing a Mad Lib. Just filling in the blanks of a sentence framework. But I told you this exercise reminded me of two activities I did. The second activity is when I go to a yoga class. I often go when my wife invites me because it's not something that I find quite pleasurable. And some of the very basic moves in a yoga class, like this downward dog movement, I just don't know that my bones and muscles work that way. But I don't quit. I make it through the class. I do the best I can. And that's what I'm going to ask of you here, because this is not an easy exercise. This is an exercise I learned about when I trained to be an AP research teacher about 6 or 7 years ago. And they said that leading students through this exercise is one way for them to kind of clear up in their mind what exactly their research question is going to address. So this framework begins with this first sentence, that there's a problems in something or with something. So of the two questions you're considering and that you did consider for your exploratory review of the lit, what problem is one of those questions connected to? So this part kids find pretty easy, but when we get down into here, this is a sentence with 3 different parts. And it has this word despite, a contrasting kind of connective word here. So despite something good that should be happening, the truth is that something bad, the problem, is really occurring. As is evident by, meaning there's evidence for this. I've got proof to show you. I'm not making this up. This is a real life problem, supporting evidence. So I might lose some of you here. Just like in yoga class when I've got to do the downward dog, I want to quit, but I don't. So I'm going to encourage you, don't quit, even if you're struggling to get through. Because this is very much a thinking exercise, and we're more concerned with the process that we're going to go through than with the final product. The final product will not be published in any way. So we want to know who is most impacted by this problem that relates to your research question. And we want you to give a reason for them being so negatively impacted. So now we're going to attempt a kind of hypothesis. Maybe this problem is caused by something. And now here it is you're going to propose a study. Because in fact, that's where we're going here, that one of these two research questions is going to be the subject of a study that you're going to conduct. So perhaps a study that investigates this problem using a specific method might lead to a solution. So again, this reminds me of a very kind of fun activity I used to do as a kid called Mad Libs, filling in the blanks and making entertaining stories. But it sometimes hurts and it makes me want to quit in the same way that when I have to do a yoga position that I'm just not equipped or built for. So I feel like the best way to understand this is to kind of look at a real example. And I thought about a research question that really interests me because this relates to my profession. So here's my problem. There's a problem with getting teachers and politicians to agree on fair ways to evaluate a teacher's effectiveness. Because a lot of you might think, well, that's a great teacher over there. Oh, that teacher's so boring over there. Oh, I hate that teacher. I love that teacher. But really, if we want to talk scientifically, what makes one teacher more effective than another? And the problem is that politicians and teachers don't always agree on the best way to evaluate teachers. So there are things going on, and there's this contrast here. So despite, here's this contrasting word, despite a national movement to use students' test scores on reading and math or writing tests to assess their teachers' effectiveness, because this happens. Some teachers are assessed based on their students' FSA reading scores or FSA writing scores or their end-of-course algebra exam scores. Despite this happening, there's a lack of teacher faith. A lot of teachers don't believe that that's the best way to measure their effectiveness. The evidence is that there are teacher protests in courts. Teachers are taking these policies to court. There are attempts to modify state and federal legislation. This is what's going on. There are protest organizations, one of which is called BadassTeachers.org, which started in response to this movement to measure teachers' effectiveness. So now here's the next part. Who's most affected? Well, this problem has negatively affected teachers' attitudes about their jobs because teachers believe that the current evaluation systems are not scientific, and they fear that the results from some such systems could be used for political reasons, like maybe getting rid of a teacher who might be effective in one way but not by this measure. Hypothesis: a possible cause of this problem is that teacher evaluation models that overwhelmingly depend on students' standardized test scores might not truly reflect the instructional effectiveness of teachers. So here's a hypothesis that maybe there's something wrong there. Perhaps a study, so here's a proposal, a study which investigates other methods to measure teacher effectiveness could lead to a solution, could lead to an evaluation system that teachers accept as more accurate and fair. Well, that took me a lot of time to write. Even though it's a short kind of little paragraph, I had to put a lot of thought in it. And that's where we are here. We want you to put a lot of thought into these two research questions you explored in your exploratory review of the literature and see if we can put them into this framework. I have another sample here for you to investigate, but finally I've got this blank framework that you could either write on in the document that I'm providing to your teachers, or that you could just use it and write the words yourself. So these are the blanks that you're going to need to fill out here. Now, after we fill these out, for both of your two prospective research questions, you're going to make a decision and tell us of those two questions, after having gone through this exercise, which one do you choose for your AP research study?